One night, in the heart of a frozen mountain town, a police officer and his loyal German shepherd stepped into a storm that would change 3 lives forever. What they found beneath a lonely bus bench was not just a starving puppy, but a choice that would test everything the officer believed about duty and love. A blizzard howled, the streets were empty, and time itself seemed to pause. Stay with this story, because what happens next is not just about rescue, it is about how small moments create miracles. And before we continue, tell us where you are watching from today and leave a comment below. This story might have found you for a reason. Silver Pine Ridge was a small mountain town in northern Colorado where winter did not arrive politely. It came like an old king who no longer asked permission, covering roofs, roads, pine trees, and human plans in white decree. On this particular evening, the snow fell sideways, driven by a wind that carved the air into knives. The streets were nearly empty, the storefronts shuttered early, and every sound seemed swallowed by the storm. It was the kind of weather that made people hurry home and animals hide, the kind of night when even the town clock outside City Hall ticked more slowly, as if time itself was reluctant to move. Officer Ethan Cole, age 41, drove his patrol vehicle carefully through the thickening snow. He was a tall man, just over 6 feet, broad-shouldered but beginning to soften at the edges, in the way men do after years of carrying too much and speaking too little. His hair was dark with threads of gray, kept short for the job, and his face held a quiet gravity shaped by long winters, long shifts, and a divorce that still lived in the silence of his kitchen. People in town described him as steady, reliable, not unkind, but not easily warm. Those who knew him better understood that the wall around him had been built by years of duty layered on top of loss. He had once been more open, more quick to laugh, before the night his marriage ended and the house learned how to echo. Beside him in the cruiser sat Atlas, a young German shepherd canine just under a year old, all long limbs and alert angles, black and tan coat glossy even in the dim cabin light. Atlas had been trained for search and rescue, tracking, and patrol assistance, but what no manual ever fully captured was the intelligence in his amber eyes. He was not merely obedient, he was thoughtful. When Ethan spoke, Atlas listened as if weighing each word for its deeper meaning. When Ethan fell silent, Atlas watched him, sensing the weather of his heart. Around the department, Atlas was known as calm, disciplined, unusually gentle for his breed. Yet when a situation demanded it, he became pure focus, as if something ancient woke behind his ribs. The radio crackled with routine updates. No major calls, no accidents, just snow and distance and the soft hum of the heater trying its best. They passed the town park, its benches buried in drifts, the playground frozen into statues of childhood. A single streetlight flickered near the bus stop at the far corner, casting a cone of pale gold into the storm. That was when Atlas shifted. His ears lifted sharply, his body leaned forward, muscles tightening. A low sound escaped his throat, not a bark, not a growl, but something between a note of recognition. Ethan slowed the cruiser. "What is it, boy?" Atlas's nose pressed toward the passenger window, fog blooming on the glass. The sound came again, urgent now. Ethan pulled over. When the door opened, the wind rushed in, stinging his face. Snow dusted his eyelashes and beard. Atlas leapt down, boots and paws crunching together on the frozen pavement. The leash went taut immediately, drawing Ethan toward the bus bench. Halfway there, Atlas stopped. Not hesitated, not slowed, stopped. His paws planted into the snow as if the earth itself had ordered him to stay. "Atlas, heel!" Ethan's voice was calm, practiced. Atlas did not move. The wind pushed snow across the sidewalk in white sheets. Under the bench, half hidden by drifted ice and shadow, something small trembled. Ethan crouched, the storm hissing around him. The shape shifted. Two thin ears rose slowly, one bent awkwardly at the tip. A narrow face emerged, black fur dulled by dirt and cold. The eyes were too large, too old for the skull they lived in. Ribs pressed clearly beneath the skin. A puppy, very young, 8 weeks, maybe less. The puppy tried to stand. Its legs shook violently, then folded. It collapsed back into the snow without a sound, as if even crying required strength it no longer had. Atlas lowered himself immediately, belly to the ground, crawling forward on his elbows until his nose touched the stranger's muzzle. He pressed his warm body against the trembling form, his breath fogging the cold, his flank shielding the puppy from the wind. The puppy shuddered once, then leaned into him, as if instinct remembered something called safety. Ethan's throat tightened. He reached carefully beneath the bench, his gloved fingers brushing the puppy's neck. The fur parted, revealing raw skin worn smooth in a narrow ring. Rope burn. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, not in prayer exactly, but in the way a man does when he must gather himself before breaking. People hurried past on the far sidewalk, heads down, collars high, pretending not to see. A jogger slowed, glanced once, then continued, the storm making excuses for everyone. Oh, Atlas remained still, unmoving, a living wall. "Good boy," Ethan whispered, though his voice shook. He slipped off his heavy patrol coat and wrapped it around the tiny body. The puppy did not resist. That frightened him most of all. When Ethan lifted the bundle, it weighed almost nothing, like holding a story the world had forgotten to finish. Atlas rose instantly, stepping so close to Ethan's knee that their legs brushed. He refused to look away from the coat. Ethan returned to the cruiser, placing the puppy carefully on the passenger seat, turning the heater toward him. Atlas climbed into the back, sitting tall, eyes locked on the small form as if guarding something sacred. Ethan keyed the radio. "Dispatch, Unit 12. I'm on a welfare transport. Injured stray puppy. Heading to North Valley Veterinary. I'll be temporarily out of service." A pause, then the dispatcher's voice, Marianne Lopez, a middle-aged woman known for her calm professionalism and the kindness she hid behind procedure, answered, "Copy, Unit 12. "Be careful out there, Ethan." He did not reply with words. He drove. The snow thickened, headlights tunneled through white. Atlas shifted in the back seat, silent, unblinking. The clinic's lights appeared like a promise. Inside, the warmth rushed over them. A veterinary technician named Hannah Price, early 20s, slender with kind eyes and hands that moved gently even when she worked quickly, hurried forward. "Oh my God," she breathed when she saw the puppy. "He's freezing." Dr. Marin Caldwell, late 50s, silver hair in a low bun, calm eyes shaped by decades of impossible decisions, took over with steady authority. The puppy's temperature was dangerously low. Dehydration was severe. Parasites were visible. When she scanned for a microchip, the machine stayed silent. "No chip," Dr. Caldwell said quietly. "And this mark," she indicated the rope burn, "this is not from a collar." Atlas whined softly from the corner. Ethan stood there, snow melting into a puddle at his boots, his heart beating too hard in his chest. They placed the puppy into a warming crate with IV fluids and soft blankets. His breathing slowed. His eyes fluttered closed. Dr. Caldwell turned to Ethan. "We'll stabilize him tonight. After that, the shelter will need to be notified. There's a stray hold period by law." Ethan nodded. He understood the words. He just did not yet understand what they would cost. Atlas pressed his nose to the crate, fogging the glass. The puppy shifted inside, small ribs rising and falling, alive. Outside, the storm continued to bury Silverpine Ridge. Inside, something ancient had begun. And winter, for the first time that night, seemed to hesitate. By the time Ethan Cole stepped back outside the clinic, Silverpine Ridge had become something else entirely. The storm had thickened, snowflakes the size of feathers swirling under the yellow streetlights, as if the sky itself had been torn open and was shedding its memories. The cold no longer felt sharp. It felt heavy, pressing down on the town with the patience of something that knew it would win eventually. Ethan stood for a moment on the concrete steps of North Valley Veterinary, his breath rising and vanishing, the glass door behind him glowing warm like a promise he was afraid to make. Inside, behind that door, the puppy lay wrapped in blankets with a needle in his tiny vein and a machine quietly counting the fragile numbers of a life that had almost slipped away. Atlas had refused to leave the crate, sitting close enough that the tip of his nose fogged the clear panel. The young German shepherd's posture was perfect, trained, disciplined, but there was nothing professional in his eyes now. There was only devotion, raw and unreasonable. Ethan rubbed his hands together, feeling the cold in his bones. The job would have told him to log the incident, notify animal control, return to patrol. The man he had been 10 years ago would have followed the list without hesitation. That man had believed the world could be fixed by rules if you stacked them neatly enough. But tonight, a different kind of ledger had opened. The radio on his belt crackled. "Unit 12, status check." Ethan pressed the button. "Still at the clinic. The dog's alive. Bad shape." A pause. The dispatcher's voice softened. "Copy. Take your time." He slipped the radio back, knowing that "take your time" was not something the department often offered. He went back inside. The waiting room was empty except for a woman seated near the window, her coat folded on her lap. She looked to be in her early 30s, with dark curly hair escaping its tie and a face marked by quiet exhaustion. Her name, the receptionist had told him earlier, was Sarah McKenna. She was a high school English teacher who had come in with her aging cat for a routine check, only to end up staying when she saw the puppy arrive. Sarah was the kind of person who listened more than she spoke, who offered warmth without needing credit for it. Her students, according to the vet tech, adored her because she noticed things other people rushed past. She looked up when Ethan entered. "How is he?" "Stable," Ethan said. "For now." She exhaled in relief and smiled, small and tired. "Good." Dr. Marin Caldwell emerged from the treatment area, her expression composed but heavy with truth. "The fluids are helping. He's not out of danger, but he's fighting. That matters." Ethan nodded. "What happens next?" "Next," Dr. Caldwell said, "we talk about choices." They stepped into her office, a narrow room crowded with books, old photographs of dogs and horses, and smiling families taped along the walls. She closed the door gently. Outside, the wind clawed at the building. "By law," she began, "we have to notify the county shelter. There's a mandatory stray hold. Someone might be looking for him." Ethan thought of the raw rope burn, the hollow ribs, the way the puppy hadn't even tried to resist when he'd been lifted. He said nothing. "We can place him under your name as a temporary medical foster," she continued. That allows you to take him home once he's strong enough, provided you follow the treatment plan. If no owner claims him after the hold period, adoption becomes legal. But until then, he technically belongs to the county. Ethan leaned back in the chair, the weight of the words settling on his shoulders. The rules were not cruel, they were careful. He understood that. He had enforced rules his whole career. Yet tonight each sentence felt like it had been written for a world that did not include Atlas, or the way the puppy had leaned into his chest like he'd known him his whole life. "I want to help him," Ethan said quietly. Dr. Caldwell met his eyes. "Then this is how you do it." They completed the paperwork slowly, carefully. Every signature felt like a promise Ethan wasn't sure he deserved to make, but he made them anyway. When he returned to the crate, Atlas stood and wagged once, restrained but hopeful. The puppy's eyes were half open now, dark and unfocused, but alive. Ethan crouched. "Hey, little guy." The puppy's tail did not move, but his breathing steadied. They kept him overnight for monitoring. Ethan stayed until nearly dawn, sitting in the chair beside the crate, coat still wet from melted snow, watching the numbers on the screen rise and fall. Atlas slept with his chin on his paws, facing the puppy as if guarding a border no one else could see. At first light, Dr. Caldwell returned with fresh charts. "He can go home today if you're willing. Fluids twice a day, dewormer, antibiotics, small feedings every 3 hours, no stress, warmth at all times." Ethan nodded. "I'll take leave." She smiled faintly. "Good." They wrapped the puppy in blankets and placed him into Ethan's arms. He was warmer now, heavier, real. Atlas walked beside him to the truck. Outside, the storm had softened into steady snowfall. Silver Pine Ridge looked cleaner, quieter, as if it were holding its breath. The drive to Ethan's cabin took 20 minutes. The roads were slow, the town nearly empty. His cabin sat just beyond the tree line on the eastern edge of town, a modest structure of wood and stone he had bought after the divorce when he could no longer stand the echo of the house he'd once shared. Inside, the heater hummed. The air smelled of pine and coffee grounds from yesterday morning. Ethan set the puppy down on a nest of blankets he had prepared before leaving the clinic. The puppy whimpered softly, confusion flickering across his face. Atlas lay down beside him immediately, pressing his side against the smaller body. The puppy shuddered once, then stilled. Ethan watched them for a long time. He thought of his ex-wife, Laura, a woman with gentle hands and a laugh that used to fill rooms. He thought of how the job had slowly taken the light from their conversations, how she had finally said, "I need more than a man who comes home already gone." The words still lived in him like unfinished weather. He knelt and adjusted the blankets. "You're safe here," he murmured, not knowing if the puppy could understand the words, but hoping he could feel the truth inside them. Atlas lifted his head and met Ethan's eyes. Outside, snow fell quietly, like the town itself was listening. For the first time in a long while, Ethan did not feel alone in his house. The night before had been about survival. This morning was about something else entirely. Hope. The first full morning after the storm arrived without color. Silver Pine Ridge lay under a pale winter sky. The mountains crouched in the distance like old guardians, still half asleep. Snow did not fall now. It simply rested everywhere, quiet and patient, as if the night had folded itself and refused to leave. Inside Ethan Cole's cabin, the air was warm and smelled faintly of coffee and pine wood. He sat on the floor beside a nest of blankets, a clipboard balanced on his knee, trying to read the printed instructions Dr. Caldwell had given him. The words blurred together: dosage times, hydration schedules, warning signs, emergency numbers. He had memorized most of it already, but he read again anyway. It felt like armor. The puppy lay curled against Atlas, breathing shallow but steady. His fur, once dulled by dirt and fear, had begun to show hints of deep black beneath the matted frost. His ribs were still visible, his paws were too thin. Yet something in the way he leaned into Atlas suggested that life, fragile as it was, had decided to stay. Atlas, young and solemn, barely moved. He was not guarding now. He was hosting. The German shepherd's large body curved protectively around the smaller one, tail tucked, ears relaxed but alert. He looked like a sentry who had finally found the treasure he had been trained to protect all along. Ethan checked the clock. Time for fluids. He moved carefully, his large hands clumsy with gentleness, lifting the tiny body just enough to slide the syringe tip between the puppy's lips. The puppy did not fight him. He accepted the water the way someone accepts help when they are too tired to question it. Atlas watched every movement, eyes following the liquid as if it were a sacred ritual. "Good," Ethan whispered. "That's it." When he finished, the puppy shivered once, then pressed his forehead into Atlas's chest and fell back asleep. Ethan leaned against the couch, exhausted, and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for days. The radio on the counter crackled. It was not his work radio, it was the old one he kept for weather and emergency channels. The voice of the local announcer drifted through the room, speaking of road closures, shelter updates, school delays. Life moving forward without waiting for any single heartbeat. His phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Caldwell. "How is he doing?" Ethan typed back. "Stable. Drinking a little. Breathing better." Almost immediately her reply came. "Good. Bring him in this afternoon for check and paperwork with county shelter rep. Holding period officially begins today." Ethan stared at the words holding period longer than necessary. The law was clear. 7 days. 7 days for someone to come looking. 7 days before hope could become something permanent. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he stood. By early afternoon, Ethan bundled the puppy into his coat again. The little body was warmer now, heavier by ounces, but every ounce felt like a gift. Atlas walked beside him to the truck, posture calm, the way a working dog moved when he knew the mission mattered. The clinic was busier than the night before. Snow had driven more animals indoors. Voices filled the waiting room. Owners worried about frostbitten paws, broken fences, missing cats. Among them sat Sarah McKenna again, the English teacher, her coat draped over her arm, her brown boots leaving wet circles on the tile. She looked up when Ethan entered. "How is he?" "Still fighting," Ethan said. She smiled, soft and steady. "Good." The puppy shifted in Ethan's arms, a faint whine escaping his throat. Sarah's hand lifted slightly, then paused, waiting for permission. "May I?" she asked. Ethan nodded. She touched the puppy's paw gently. "You're a strong little soul," she murmured, the kind of sentence that didn't belong to science, but mattered anyway. Dr. Caldwell appeared with another woman, Janice Holbrook, late 40s, county shelter representative, tall and serious, hair pulled back tight, clipboard already in hand. Janice was known around town for being fair and precise. She believed deeply in procedure because procedure was the only thing that kept chaos from swallowing smaller lives. They stepped into the office. Janice reviewed the case. No chip, rope injury, severe neglect, no matching missing reports yet. She nodded. "Stray hold begins today. 7 days. During that time you are approved as temporary medical foster." You follow the treatment plan exactly. Any change, you call the clinic or animal control immediately." Ethan signed where she pointed. "After 7 days, if no one claims him, adoption becomes legal," Janice continued. "At that point, you can file permanent ownership." "Until then, he remains under county protection." Ethan swallowed. "Understood." Janice glanced at Atlas, who sat beside Ethan's chair, eyes fixed on the puppy. "That dog yours too?" "Yes," Ethan said. "K9. Janice's gaze softened just slightly. "Looks like he's already made his decision." Ethan almost laughed. They finished the paperwork. The puppy was weighed, checked, wrapped in fresh blankets. His numbers were better. Not good yet, but better. When they stepped outside, the light had changed. The sky over Silver Pine Ridge glowed faintly pink, the mountains wearing their snow like crowns. Ethan stood for a moment on the clinic steps, the puppy pressed against his chest, Atlas close at his side. He felt like a man standing at the edge of a bridge, aware that everything behind him was already unreachable. The drive home was slow and quiet. Inside the cabin, the world became very small. Blankets, bowls, measured water, medicine timers. Ethan's phone buzzed again, this time from his sergeant, Mark Holloway, early 50s, broad-shouldered, gray mustache, the kind of man who had been on the force long enough to know which rules mattered most. "You taking time off?" "Yes." "Good. We got you covered." Ethan stared at the screen, surprised by how much those words meant. As evening fell, the puppy stirred more often. His eyes opened longer. He drank from a dish without the syringe for the first time. It was clumsy and slow, but it happened. Atlas wagged once, proud. Ethan laughed, a real laugh, surprised by its sound. Later, when the fire crackled and shadows stretched across the cabin walls, Ethan prepared the sleeping arrangement exactly as Dr. Caldwell had suggested. 2 beds, close but separate, to encourage independence without fear. The puppy lasted perhaps 5 seconds. A thin sound rose from him, trembling and desperate, the sound of something that had learned too early what it meant to be alone. His body stiffened, then began to shake. Atlas stood, stepped into the puppy's bed, and lay down beside him without hesitation. Ethan froze. Then he sighed. "All right," he said quietly. "We'll do it your way." He pushed the beds together. The puppy immediately pressed against Atlas and went still, breathing deep, as if the earth had finally stopped moving. Ethan sat on the floor beside them, his back against the couch, his knees drawn up. He watched the two of them for a long time, the young German shepherd and the battered stray, breathing together in the soft orange light of the fire. Outside, snow slid from the roof with a hushed whisper. Inside, something fragile and stubborn had begun to root itself into the bones of the house. Ethan rested his head against the wall and closed his eyes. The holding period had begun, and with it, the longest week of his life. The cabin no longer sounded the way it used to. Before, silence had lived there like an unpaid bill, collecting dust on the shelves and echoes in the corners. Now it was different. It breathed. It shifted. It listened. Even the wind outside seemed to lower its voice. Morning arrived quietly, thin sunlight slipping through the frost-laced windows. Snow rested on the pine branches like folded wings. Silver Pine Ridge stood pale and patient beyond the trees. Ethan Cole woke on the floor, his back stiff, a blanket half fallen from his shoulders. He had slept there without meaning to, the way exhausted men do when the night has asked more questions than they could answer. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Atlas. The young German shepherd lay curled in the dog bed, his body forming a protective arc. Pressed into his chest was the puppy, small and dark, breathing softly, one paw draped across Atlas's leg as if anchoring himself to the only certainty he knew. The sight struck Ethan with a quiet force. He remained still for a moment, afraid that any movement might shatter the fragile peace the room had finally learned. The puppy stirred, lifting his head slightly. His eyes, once clouded with exhaustion and fear, now followed Ethan's face with cautious awareness. They were not trusting yet, but they were no longer empty. "Morning, kid," Ethan whispered. The puppy's ears twitched. His tail did not move, but his breathing stayed calm. Atlas lifted his head and wagged once, low and slow, his eyes warm. Ethan rose carefully and went to the small kitchen. He checked the feeding chart taped to the fridge. Teaspoons every 3 hours. Warm water, no rush. He prepared the meal slowly, his movements deliberate. When he returned, he knelt by the blankets and held the dish beneath the puppy's nose. The puppy hesitated, sniffed, then took one small bite. He paused, swallowed, looked up at Atlas as if asking permission to continue. Atlas nudged the bowl closer with his nose. The puppy ate again. Ethan exhaled. It was not much, but it was everything. By midday, the cabin had learned new rhythms. Water offered, medicine given, temperatures checked, soft words spoken into the spaces where fear used to echo. Ethan kept the television off. He moved slowly. He closed doors gently. He let the world become small on purpose. Outside, the town of Silver Pine Ridge continued without them. Snowplows cleared roads. Stores reopened. Children returned to school, with boots still damp from yesterday's storm. Life did not wait. Inside the cabin, healing did. The puppy slept often. When he woke, he searched for Atlas first, his small nose moving through the air until it found the larger dog's scent. Only then would he relax. Ethan noticed the signs of trauma in the ways Dr. Caldwell had warned him about. The flinch at sudden sound, the way the puppy froze when he felt alone, the tightness in his body whenever the world seemed too large. In the afternoon, the puppy tried to walk across the room on his own. He made it 3 steps before his legs trembled and he sat heavily, surprised by his own weakness. Atlas rose immediately and stood beside him. The puppy looked up at him, then pressed his shoulder into Atlas's leg and stayed there, breathing. Ethan sat on the floor watching, his heart heavy and full at the same time. He thought of Laura again, of the nights when silence had filled their house, and neither of them had known how to ask the right questions. He thought of the choices he had made, the ones he had delayed, the ones he could not undo. For years he had believed that healing was something that arrived only after you were strong enough to earn it. He was learning now that sometimes it arrived when you were weakest. The sun lowered behind the trees. The cabin glowed gold. The world outside faded to blue. Ethan prepared the evening feeding, careful and slow. The puppy drank a little more than he had in the morning. When he finished, he licked his nose and leaned into Atlas's chest. A tiny victory. Later, a sudden gust rattled the window. The puppy startled violently, his body stiffening, his breath breaking into sharp little sounds. He scrambled backward, trying to disappear beneath the chair, eyes wide, heart racing. Ethan did not rush him. Atlas moved first. The German shepherd lowered himself onto the floor, then crawled toward the puppy inch by inch, slow and deliberate, making himself small, harmless, a bridge of warmth and patience. He lay beside the puppy, touching but not trapping, his breathing steady. The puppy's panic slowed. His eyes softened. He pressed his face into Atlas's neck and went still. Ethan watched the fear drain from the room. He knelt nearby, close enough to matter, far enough to let the dogs do the work he could not. That night, he attempted again to place the puppy in his own bed. Again, the panic returned. Again, Atlas moved in without question. Ethan laughed quietly, the sound shaky with something like wonder. "All right," he murmured. "Together, then." He slid the beds fully into one. The puppy relaxed instantly, his small body curved against Atlas's chest. His breathing slowed, his eyes closed. Ethan turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the fire and the faint blue of the night beyond the windows. He lay on the floor again, close enough to hear both heartbeats. For the first time in years, the cabin did not feel empty. Outside, winter pressed its cold face to the glass. Inside, something warmer was learning how to stay. The night stretched long and quiet. The puppy woke once, lifted his head, and looked directly at Ethan. Their eyes met. Ethan did not speak. He did not have to. The puppy lowered his head again and slept. The house breathed. The storm that had once swallowed the town now lay quiet in the woods, as if it, too, were listening. Home, Ethan realized, was not a place you arrived at. It was a thing you built, one careful moment at a time. The first real setback arrived without warning. Silver Pine Ridge woke beneath a pale winter sun, the mountains washed in a colorless glow that made everything feel too quiet, too exposed. The night had been calm, too calm. Ethan Cole had learned during years of patrol work to distrust mornings that looked peaceful without earning it. He was kneeling by the blankets when he noticed it. The puppy had not moved. He lay where Atlas had curled him the night before, his small body stiff with stillness, his eyes open but distant, fixed on something Ethan could not see. His chest rose, but shallow. His nose was dry. His mouth refused the water Ethan offered. Ethan's heart began to pound. "Hey," he whispered, keeping his voice low, careful not to shatter whatever fragile balance the room still held. "Hey, kid." No response. Atlas sensed the change before Ethan finished the word. The young German shepherd rose, ears alert, body tense. He nudged the puppy's shoulder gently. When the puppy did not react, Atlas whined once, sharp and confused. Ethan pressed his fingers to the puppy's side. The body felt warmer than it should. Fever. The fear that followed was not loud. It was precise. It cut straight through him. He moved fast without panicking. Coat, keys, blanket. He wrapped the puppy carefully and lifted him against his chest. Atlas followed so close that his shoulder brushed Ethan's leg the entire way to the truck. The road to North Valley Veterinary blurred beneath the tires. The world outside the windshield seemed unreal, too clean, too ordinary for the small battle happening in Ethan's arms. Inside the clinic, Dr. Caldwell was already waiting. Hannah appeared with a thermometer, then a stethoscope. Janice Holbrook, the shelter representative, stood back by the wall, her expression tight with concern. "Mild fever," Dr. Caldwell said. "Stress spike, possibly reaction to medication layered over trauma. His body is remembering too much too fast." Atlas trembled where he sat, nails clicking against the tile. When the tech moved the puppy onto the exam table, Atlas tried to follow, whining, his leash catching on the chair. Dr. Caldwell hesitated only a second. "Let him stay." Atlas leapt onto the table and pressed himself along the puppy's spine, his warm body covering the smaller one as if he could physically block the illness. His breathing slowed, deep and steady. The puppy's eyes flickered. Ethan stood there, his hands shaking, one resting on each small chest, feeling both heartbeats at once. "We're in front of it," Dr. Caldwell said. That matters. We adjust the meds, fluids, warmth. He needs quiet and someone with him constantly tonight. Ethan did not hesitate. He won't be alone. The hours that followed passed in a blur of whispered instructions, measured doses, soft towels, gentle hands. When they were finally allowed to leave, the sky had darkened and the mountains were swallowed again by shadow. The cabin welcomed them with silence. Ethan laid the puppy on the blankets. Atlas curled around him. The fire burned low. Outside, snow whispered against the windows. The puppy shivered. His eyes searched the room without focus, as if his mind had slipped backward into old fear. Ethan knelt beside them, his back against the couch, his hand resting on the puppy's ribs. He stayed there through the night. At some point after midnight, the world went very still. The fire dimmed, the wind died. The clock on the wall seemed to forget how to move. Ethan's head drooped, exhaustion claiming him. Then he felt it, a small weight on his chest. He opened his eyes. The puppy had crawled from the blankets and climbed onto him, trembling, his black face inches from Ethan's own. His breath was warm and uncertain. His paws were tucked beneath him, like he was afraid of falling through the man beneath him. Atlas lay pressed against Ethan's shoulder, his white and tan form a solid wall of warmth. The puppy's tongue touched Ethan's hand once. Then again, not a kiss, a question. Ethan did not speak. He simply remained. The puppy's eyes softened, his breathing steadied. He rested his chin against Ethan's chest and finally, deeply, slept. Morning came quietly. The fever had broken. The puppy accepted water. Then, slowly, a spoonful of food. He stopped often, lifting his head to look for Atlas, then continuing when the German shepherd nudged him gently. By afternoon, the puppy stood on his own for several seconds. He wobbled, surprised by the strength returning to his legs. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest that he had been holding too long. 2 days later, the puppy followed Atlas across the room without falling. That night, for the first time, he played. It was not much. Just a soft tap of his paw against a toy, a startled blink, then a tiny huff of breath that sounded almost like laughter. Atlas bowed clumsily, inviting him. The puppy did not yet understand the rules, but he understood the feeling. Ethan sat on the floor watching them, the firelight dancing on their fur, and thought of all the ways a heart could be broken and still choose to open again. He did not know yet what the future would demand. He only knew that whatever it was, he would not face it alone. The fire had returned. And this time, it was not burning things down. It was keeping something alive. Spring did not arrive in Silver Pine Ridge all at once. It arrived the way hope often does, quietly, carefully, almost shy of being noticed. The snow retreated from the roads first, then from the roofs, then from the pines that guarded the edges of Ethan Cole's cabin. Water dripped from the branches, like the world remembering how to breathe again. The mountains remained white, ancient and watchful, but the air had softened. It no longer cut. It carried. Ethan stood on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching Atlas and the puppy, no longer simply the puppy, move through the yard together. The younger dog's steps were surer now. His ribs no longer pressed sharply beneath his coat. His eyes, once full of shadows, had begun to reflect light. He followed Atlas everywhere, not with fear anymore, but with purpose, as if the older dog were the path, and the world simply continued beyond him. The phone buzzed in Ethan's pocket. "Dr. Caldwell, results are in. No one has filed a claim. Hold period ends today." Ethan closed his eyes. 7 days had passed like 7 years. He went inside and knelt between the two dogs, resting his hands on their warm shoulders. "We're going to town." They loaded into the truck. Atlas climbed in first, disciplined as always. The younger dog hesitated only a second before following, his tail lifting uncertainly, then settling. The shelter office was quiet when they arrived. Janice Holbrook greeted them with the same professional calm, but this time her mouth curved into a small smile. "No claims," she confirmed. "No reports matching him. Legally, he's yours if you want him." Ethan didn't answer right away. He knelt in front of the younger dog. The puppy's eyes met his, steady now, curious, waiting. "You survived something that should have turned you into nothing," Ethan murmured. "You didn't go out. You stayed hot." Atlas stepped closer and bumped the puppy's shoulder. Ethan exhaled. "You're Cinder," he said, "because some embers don't go cold." Cinder's tail wagged once, then again, then his whole body followed. Ethan signed the papers. Official, final, permanent. When they stepped outside, the sky over Silver Pine Ridge was impossibly blue. Weeks passed. Cinder grew. His coat thickened and shone. His body filled out. His ears straightened, one still slightly bent at the tip, like a permanent reminder of where he had been. He learned the rhythms of the house, the clink of bowls in the morning, the click of Ethan's boots by the door, the soft thud of Atlas's tail against the wall when he dreamed. Fear did not vanish overnight, but it loosened its grip. Cinder learned that doors could close and still open again. One afternoon, Ethan drove them back to the bus bench. The same street, the same patch of sidewalk, the same light pole, only the snow was gone. Cinder sniffed the ground beneath the bench, paused, then trotted away without fear, the memory of that place losing its power. Atlas followed, glancing back once as if to confirm the past had finally let go. Ethan sat on the bench and watched the two German shepherds run, black and tan, white and gold, two bodies moving as one story. Later that week, Ethan's children visited Lily, 10, with her mother's gentle eyes and her own fierce heart, and Connor, 13, all elbows and questions and quiet hope. They had been wary at first, unsure how to greet a dog that carried shadows in his bones. Cinder surprised them. When Connor tripped and scraped his knee, Cinder was there before Ethan could rise, nose pressed to the boy's cheek, licking carefully until the pain turned into laughter. Atlas circled once and bumped Connor's shoulder, sealing the moment like punctuation. Lily knelt and whispered stories into Cinder's fur. He listened as if they mattered. The house learned a new shape. Not long after, they returned for Cinder's checkup. "Heart strong," Dr. Caldwell said, smiling. "Weight good, stress markers normal." She shook her head in wonder. "I don't often see a rescued puppy and a home puppy knit this tight." Atlas pressed his shoulder into Cinder, agreeing in a language older than words. Neighbors began to notice. People stopped when they walked past. Children offered pats. Cinder stood easily now, not counting exits, not searching corners. He leaned into hands with quiet trust. Evenings settled into a rhythm. 2 bowls on the mat, 2 sets of tags clinking, 1 big rug where everyone slept. Sometimes, in the deepest part of night, Ethan would wake and see Cinder lying outside the children's bedroom door, not because he was afraid, but because he wanted to be there if anyone needed him. That was the moment Ethan understood. Cinder was no longer a story about being saved. He was the one doing the saving, in small ways, in ordinary ways, in the ways that never make headlines. One night, as the house slept, Ethan sat on the floor with both dogs' heads resting on his knees and thought about the night the blizzard had forced him to stop. He had believed the decision was his, but the truth was simpler and stranger. Atlas had chosen Cinder. Cinder had chosen to live, and both of them had chosen Ethan. Winter had only been the stage. Love had written the ending. Sometimes God does not send thunder or angels or miracles that shake the sky. Sometimes he sends a small hungry puppy, a loyal dog, and a tired human heart at the exact moment they are needed. This story reminds us that the greatest miracles are often quiet. They happen when we choose to stay, when it would be easier to walk away, when we choose compassion over comfort, when we listen to the gentle voice God places inside our hearts. In our daily lives, we are surrounded by moments just like this. Someone needs our time, someone needs our patience, someone needs our love. And when we answer that call, even in small ways, heaven moves closer to earth. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story of love, faith, and second chances. May God bless you and your family. May He protect your home and guide your steps. And if you believe in miracles and in the power of staying when it matters most, type Amen in the comments and let your light shine.